This week's episodes were brought to you by the generous support of Andrew Henninger. Hey folks, Quill18 here, and welcome to another episode of our Unity base building series, codenamed Project Porcupine. And we're going to continue our work on our inventory in this episode. So we've got it set up so that we've got the ability to have sort of just loose items that are lying on the floor. And I'm calling these inventory items. Actually, at the start of the project, I was calling them loose items. And then I was calling furniture installed items, or maybe it was loose objects, installed objects, one of those two. And it's possible that we'll rename the inventory to something else. But the idea is this is stuff that's not installed furniture. It's just loose items that are part of our overall inventory. And in fact, we'll show up in some sort of inventory list later on of how much stuff do we have stored in our base overall. The inventory is going to be the sum of all these things. Sometimes they'll be lying on the floor. Sometimes they'll be stored in a stockpile. Sometimes they'll be carried by a character. And we have most of the data implemented for this. We track the fact that inventory exists. We track where it is. And we've also tied into our visual system so that a sprite gets generated for our inventory when it's, existing somewhere on the map. However, these stacks of metal plate, which I realize the gray on gray here is not good. I'll have to do a little bit of a recolor. And some people are sending in a variety of different graphic tile sets for, the actual tile map, the walls, so on and so forth, and may get started with the object as well. I am collecting those. We will start to implement some of these new tile sets that people have sent in at some point, because there's some really good ones. And if you still have design ideas for walls and tiles and all that, please keep sending them in. Do make sure you've tested that they are seamless, that you don't see like a little line in between like the little ways that the walls sort of meet up and merge. Double check all that, but really looking forward to implementing some of the graphic sets that people have sent in there. So we want to add a little number here to show the stack size for one. Also, very soon after that, we're going to be revamping our character system and job queue so that these actually get used for things. And for one, when we go and we build a wall, we don't want our character to just go to the wall and build it instantly. We want our character to pick up some metal plates and then use that to build the wall. In addition to that, I want to be able to define a stockpile, which says, store things here, and then have our character automatically be like, oh, I'll grab these metal plates and drop them off in a stockpile to make a nice little neat cleanup of things. So that will come after that. But let's work on the visual aspect first, and let's figure out how are we going to get the text to pop up over here. So there's a variety of different ways to get text to show up. I mean, one thing we could do is we could go and make our own, font glyphs, like in Photoshop, right? We can just make an image that is our font. Either we've hand drawn it, pixel font, or we went and used a regular font and just typed it in, made a, just a PNG file or whatever kind of image you want, and then brought this in here as a 2D sprite, and then we can display it on the screen just like any other 2D sprite. But then we'd have to write sort of our own text rendering system, and that would be kind of awkward. It does give you a lot of control, but probably isn't what we want to mess with here. So then we have really 2 or 2.5 different ways of dealing with it. We could still use, and this is sort of the old school way of doing it, the 3D text mesh over here, right? 3D object, 3D text. And we'll bring it in. I'm still running the game over here. I'm going to get it positioned where my character is. Where's my character right now? My character is currently sitting at 5549. So let's grab this text and go, 5549. Now, we can't quite see it. Our user interface here is in the way in the editor, and it's bothered me for a long time, and I just realized, or I looked up, that there's a good way to hide it over here. If you go to this layers pull down over here, okay, the top right corner, you've got account, layout, and layers. These layers determine what gets rendered in the editor view, in the scene editor. So if we just turn off the UI over there, I'm so happy all of a sudden. I can't even tell you. The UI still shows up in the game, which is cool, because that's more of a camera rendering in there. Anyway, so now that we've done that, I can go and check out our 3D text over here. And if we just move the Z index, well, actually, we don't have to do that. Why isn't it rendering at all? I was going to say, the problem is it doesn't render the way that we expect. Is it because the default layer is behind everything? And I believe that is indeed the case. If we go and we check our sorting layers here, yeah, that is why. So we have these sorting layers, right, which determine what order sprites get generated in. are 3D objects. So the layers, these are sorting layers, or you might think of them as sprite layers or 2D layers. So when we have a sprite, one of the things we can define for a sprite renderer is what layer it gets rendered on. Now this is different from this layer over here, which is sort of base Unity way of grouping things, and in particular ties into the physics system. So this sorting layer is only for 2D rendering. And as a result, our text over here, no matter what layer I put it on, right? Clearly, like character and tile and inventory don't exist as a layer over here. So no matter what layer I put it on, it won't, see if I go to UI or whatever, it won't still poke through. And the reason is, if we go to this, by the way, you can get there by going Edit, Project Settings, Tags and Layers over here. I just find it a lot easier to just pick any object you want, go to Layer, and then click Add Layer. It just brings you to the same page over here. So rather than set the 3D text on a layer, you might want to set it to a sorting layer. Now, the default layer over here, right now, because of organization, is at the bottom. If I go and we slide it up to the top, our text now shows up. So the rendering order does correctly get determined there. The downside is that unless something is a sprite renderer, we cannot put it on a different sorting layer through the inspector. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's say, okay, we've got this. Let's make, so we've got this tile UI layer over here. And I don't think we're using it. I think this has always been the idea for things like numbers and little tooltips and whatever that should show up on top of tiles. I'm pretty sure we don't use this right now. So tile UI, or maybe we'll make a new one. Tell you what, we'll do that. We'll call it inventory UI. So the idea with this one, and we'll put it right there, is that this is for our text that is supposed to show up on top of inventory. So we clearly want this text to be above inventory. And in this order, the lower down something is, basically the later it gets drawn. So the stuff that gets drawn last is going to be on top of everything else, right? So we want our inventory UI, our little number tags, to be rendered on top of our actual inventory graphics. So that's great. So what we really want, if we were to use these 3D sprites, is we would like to use this 3D text mesh to be on that tile UI layer, because they would be stacked perfectly. It'd be behind our characters, but above this. The problem is, our mesh renderer does not have the option to set the sorting layer. And at first, I assumed that meant that the sorting layers were only used by the 2D rendering engine. Turns out that's not true. The sorting layers do get used by everything, but there's just not an inspector component to control that. But we could make that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little script in utilities here, because we might use it for more stuff. And we're going to make a C# script, and we're going to call it set sorting layer. And what it's going to do is in the start, so we have a renderer on our object. Get component. We have a renderer. I mean, everything that is visual has some kind of renderer. In our case, it happens to be a mesh renderer, but mesh renderer is derived from renderer. So all that matters is we have a renderer, and renderer has an option for setting a sorting layer name. You can also give it by ID, but you can just set a name. So if we have a public string sorting layer name, like that, and we can have it start at default, because that's actually what it would be. And for clarity, we can do that. And if we set the renderer sorting layer name to this, and we don't need an update function at all, then if we go back into Unity, and if we take our 3D text here, I guess I'm not running, so I should probably go and stop this. Let me create a new 3D object at, I don't remember what it was. It was something like 5540 or 5545, something right around there. If we add the set sorting layer, and I tell it you want to be on the inventory UI, is that how I spelled it? You could make a drop down many things. Oh, great, I didn't save it because it wasn't in the thing. Inventory, and I guess for consistency, we won't put in a space over there. So inventory UI as one word, like that. And if we look at our new text, and I do this, so now if I hit play, our text, and load, there we go. Our text is rendering correctly. Even though, again, our text doesn't have a little pull-down menu for sorting layer, it is now rendering correctly because it's no longer on the default layer. And we know that because the default sorting layer would be rendered first. Therefore, this would be underneath everything. The fact that we are seeing this is that clearly this is not being rendered on the default sorting layer, but is instead taking advantage of our little manually set sorting layer name over here to be inventory UI. So we can use a 3D text mesh, and for some things we might, but the other way of doing it is to use the actual UI system. And I think I'm going to prefer to do that. Although I think, unless I'm wrong, I think the UI system also suffers from the fact that it doesn't let you set a sorting layer by default, right? It's just rendered in the UI layer and actually rendered on top of everything else, which is kind of interesting. And therefore may not be what we want. Ooh, yeah, that's true. That's actually, Because here's the thing. All right, so if we hit play again and load, I mean, first of all, we probably wouldn't want it to be in the base canvas because normally, if you set something in the base canvas here, like UI, text, and let me create a text that says, 18, because that's how many inventory items we've got, and we need to actually be able to see the UI again. Layers, UI. All right, so I've got that, and then I take this, and where is it? It's not setting the canvas size properly in the editor. Hang on, let's try this again. And load. And canvas, UI, text, 18. How come it's not, what am I I'm going crazy here. Shouldn't there be a big number 18 in the middle of my screen? Why am I going crazy? It's just text, just like all these others, right? We got text over here, which we can move around. Why is it not actually rendering? I feel like I'm going nuts. It doesn't have a font selected. Did it not? Oh, it's not defaulting to having a font? Maybe because I added it in while the game was running. I guess. That seems a little bit weird, but okay. Anyway, let's go ahead and embiggen that font size. So we got this 18. We could like sort of move it, right? So that's the sort of idea we want. I want like a number to show up there. Obviously, this font and this color is terrible, but we want something like that. Now, being part of the normal UI canvas means that as we move our screen, it's like, right, that won't update because the position of the text is based on the pixels on the screen. Now, you can convert from world coordinates to the screen coordinates, and therefore you can have a little script in this text that automatically follows the little, the sprite around by updating things on the world canvas. But again, there's certain issues with this not necessarily being on the right layer because this is going to render on top of everything else, even when it doesn't make any sense. If our characters are standing on top of inventory, we probably don't want the number to show through the character. I mean, maybe we do, maybe we don't, I don't know. So adding it to the base canvas may not be what we're looking for. So what else might we want to consider? Well, we might want to consider using a world space canvas. So if we go to say our inventory sprite controllers and we grab one of these steel plates over here, which you can't see through the UI over here. I'm going to have to keep toggling this on and off, aren't I? I guess so. I keep hitting the wrong thing. There we go. So we got our steel plate over here. Well, we can add a canvas attached to this steel plate, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go UI, canvas. I'm going to add a new one, and I'm going to specify that instead of screen space, which is normal, right? Normally the canvas exists in the screen space where like 0, 0 is at the bottom, and the top right corner is a number equal to the pixel resolution of your window here. But you can also, and by default, it doesn't really have a position per se, but you can also use a world space canvas. And a world space canvas exists inside of your world is one of the easiest ways to consider it. And what's interesting here is you'll notice when you do set your canvas to world space, you actually get to specify a sorting layer as well. All of a sudden, it might like hint that, oh, this sounds pretty good. So let's assume this is going to be inventory UI canvas that's attached to the steel plate. That's pretty good. And let's go and attach, I don't know, some sort of text to this, right? So we got some sort of text. It's going to be 18 We're going to have to set a font, apparently. I guess we can use one of the cool fonts that we've got over there. Do we have it showing up? We do. And yeah, let's, for the sake of argument, let's go and tune this to a reasonable size. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just bring our canvas down a little bit, because it's way too big, because this is number of, this is effectively number of pixels, based on this dynamic pixels per blah, blah, blah. So we want the size to be roughly the same as this object. In fact, why don't we make it a 1x1 object, this canvas? And then we'll take the text and tell it just be the same size as the canvas itself. So now we have this 1x1 canvas, and you can see over here, it looks about right? If we take the canvas, and if the anchor point was set, because of what I've done, if we set it to, oh, I'm holding the wrong key, aren't I? No. Alt also sets position. Oh, I'm setting it on text. That's the problem. Hold on. Oh, you can't set the anchor point for that. Interesting. So there we go. Center it there. Yeah, we may still have to change our center point. But there we go. Now you can see there's a canvas that is perfectly aligned with our tile and the text under it. Now, the text isn't showing up because it's too damn big. We can, to a limited extent, shrink the font. But what's happening is it's literally so big that you can't see it. If we change the overflow to allow just overflow in both, then we can see over here that, oh yeah, the text is huge compared to what's going on. And why is that? Well, we told our canvas that it should be 1x1 in world space, but the conversion from pixels to world space isn't quite there yet. So our text, which is just font size 18, is there. And there's a limit to how far we can sort of shrink it and still have it be visible. So let's assume we don't want to go or mess around with font sizes. Instead, what we can say is we can affect the scaling by changing the reference pixels. No? I guess we just change the scaling. That's probably what we want to do. We don't want to change the font size because, again, at a smaller font size, at some point it sort of vanishes. And you've got these render issues, unless you increase the dynamic pixels per, and then you get a little bit more clarity here. But what we really want to do is take the text then and just scale it down until it makes sense. So like 0.1 by 0.1 by 0.1. How does that look? Really? It doesn't render at all? I guess that was just too small. 0.2 by 0.2 seems okay. That's fine. Oh, I don't need to change the scaling in the Z. That might have been part of the confusion. That was the confusion. Oh, now it renders fine at 1.1.1. I must have mistyped something. But yeah, the Z axis doesn't need any scaling because that's sort of depth, so it doesn't make sense to change that. So you can just ignore it. But the X and Y will set it to 0.1. And then, as a combination of our dynamic pixels per plus our actual overall rendered font size, which is this, you end up with a different amount of clarity. So if I left it, what was the default font size? Was it 14? Let me just make another random text element here. 14 is the default font size. So let's assume we don't want to mess with the font size. We'll leave it there, and instead, yeah, we can just play with the scaling. That's too small. That looks like it's about right. There we are, and we're going to say, listen, I want you to be attached to the bottom left canvas corner of the canvas, and then we can just change the anchor point. Oh, because of the descenders, it doesn't look quite right. That's interesting. I mean, we can just manually fix that, which may be what we want to do. Depending on what font you take, and depending on a couple of settings in your font, the amount of space underneath the baseline of your text will be different. And the reason is, what if we have a letter like J? See, now all of a sudden, if you've got J's in here, now the fact that we're aligned at the bottom makes perfect sense, right? But with characters without descenders, it looks like you've got this extra space. So since we know that it's just going to be numbers here, we can just manually sort of tweak the position a bit so that we're happy with the overall alignment. And so that's the idea. What we can do to add some visibility here is we can do something like we can add a component called outline and give this maybe a white outline over here. So you can see it's like it got a little bit of a funny way of doing the outline. We can bring them a little closer together, like that. So, I mean, up here it looks a little bit funny, but on the actual rendered screen here, it just seems to give a nice little white outline to our number, which makes it pop a little bit bigger. I don't like this font at all. for the numbers. I think this 8 looks way too squashed. I am not happy with it. So let's not use this font. Let's try one of the other ones that people had recommended might be a cool possibility. That's all right. That's all right. And I mean, some might be better for text and others might be better for showing numbers on the screen. Oh, I like this. I think that's relatively easy to read at this size. Also notice that this font has a slightly different descender rule, which you can tweak in your import over here. Or it's the ascent calculation mostly, but you can tweak a couple of different ways. So this one looks like we might be happier with the balance, and we might be able to set our Y position back to 0. Now that's, I like. How come there's no, oh, because it doesn't descend very much, I guess. Yeah, that's why. All right, that's pretty good. I think it does need a little bit of a little tweak on the left-hand side. And is it maybe a little too big? Maybe a little too big. So we should scale it down a wee bit more. So the advantage of doing something like this is that the canvas here belongs to the world space and properly considers stacking orders. So for example, if I were to go and like move the character through here, now the furniture will still be behind all this, but the character is rendered above the number. So now the number is not above the character, which would look dumb. Now, here we should not be allowed to do this. We shouldn't be allowed, well, I guess sometimes you might be able to stack some inventory on top of furniture. It certainly doesn't make sense for walls, but we can deal with that afterwards. So I'm kind of happy with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this canvas here into a prefab. And then whenever we have a stack of inventory objects that has a max stack size above 1, we will simply have our inventory sprite controller attach this canvas to this object. So we actually don't have a prefab category right now. So I'm going to make one. Folder, prefab, and then, so the game's still running right now. If I stopped running, we would lose this. But if I make a prefab out of this, which you should be able to do while it's running, and then we hit stop, there we go. So we still have this canvas. We're going to call this the inventory UI, like that. So now if we run the game again and we hit load, and then we go and we find our inventory sprite controller, so our steel plates, if I go to each one of these and just add the canvas to each one, like that, there. I'm pretty happy with that, and the stacking will be fine and whatever. Is there overhead to having multiple canvases? Well, yeah, I guess. There's overhead like everything, but as far as I know, there's not any additional overhead to doing this versus, you know, just having sprites that you've custom made or 3D mesh or whatever. And the 3D mesh text never looks very good. It has very limited sort of font rendering control, whereas the UI system actually has quite a bit more ways for you to sort of get fonts you're really, really happy with and make sure that they're relatively clear. There's always little, you know, little pixel issues like here. Should we do something? Should we change the way this font gets scaled or something? And you can mess with it with a bunch of different ways. With the reference pixels, it's kind of interesting. More dynamic pixels adds clarity, but if you actually bring it down, so where the pixel font is a little bit less clear, the fuzziness actually makes it like a little smoother over here. I don't know how it'll show on YouTube. So it's sort of a decision. Like when you zoom in super close, this one is a little crisper, and this one's a little bit soft. But it's still very, very legible. And actually in these sort of in-between bits, it actually just looks like it's just a little bit more anti-aliased, right? By rendering your font at effectively a slightly lower resolution, you are effectively adding a little bit more anti-aliasing. You're fuzzing things just a bit. But this doesn't look blurry at all. In fact, I think it looks quite good. This one's almost too sharp and pops too much, especially with the edge effects. So actually, I think I'm a big fan of this. I think I'm going to change the dynamic pixels for this canvas by default to something like 3.5. Like we were at 3.3 or something like that. And as a result as well, you technically are using a little bit less overhead for rendering your font. So let's go and make a tweak to our, not one of these, we are going to go to scripts, controllers. It is our inventory sprite controller. And we are going to add a public up here, a public game object. This is going to be the inventory UI prefab, like that. And then we're going to make sure to assign that. So our controller over here, scroll down, inventory sprite controller. So that's got a slot for that. Oh, did I not rename you? Inventory UI, enter. Maybe I didn't hit enter. Oh, we can get rid of this text mesh over here. So we're going to drag that into there. And then when we create a sprite, and we know where we create a sprite, we create the sprites or the actual graphics over here in on inventory created. And so what we're going to say is if inv dot max stack size is greater than 1. This is a stackable object. So let's add a inventory UI component. Which is text that shows the number or the current stack size. Stack size. Like that. Boom. Like that. So we have our inventory game object. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new copy of our prefab. So we're going to create a new game object. We're going to call it UI Geo. And we're going to instantiate the inventory UI prefab. And if we don't pass it anything, it'll default to like 0, 0, 0, 0, like just the root position, root rotation. And I guess that's fine. We could set it to the parent, but just I think with the UI, it might be slightly, I guess it doesn't really matter which way we do it. All right, let's just go with this way. It's fine. So we're going to instantiate a copy of this UI prefab. Then we're going to tell this UI prefab transform that its parent, well, its set parent, is the inventory game object, like that. And then we're going to say .game object, UI game object .transform .position, and we're just going to set it to vector.0. That way, relative to its parent, oh, sorry, not position, that would be world position, local position. We're going to say relative to the parent, be at 0 offset. So you're going to be at the same exact position as the parent. And that's for the canvas element. And then, you know, our text element can still be offset or whatever if we need to adjust things. But the canvas will always have exactly the same coordinates as the parent. Except that's not true because it actually has to be offset by half a unit. Yeah, I'm really going to, I changed the sprite centering. I'm positive of it. I had good intentions to start off with, but apparently it's gone stupid. So we actually have to be half a unit off. Or do we? Yeah, because that's actually built in over here. That's why it was lining up properly, yeah. So we have to make sure that relative to the parent, you're just half a unit off because of centering. If we change the sprite, what is it called? Anchor? This may need to be modified. And the fact that we're having to do this, and the fact that we needed to put in the hack for the rotation, all leads me to think that, yeah, we're going to change. I'm going to do that. Heck, we might do that right now. I think we will do that right now. We're going to finish this, though. You're going to set local parent. That's going to be good. And then what? Oh, UI go dot get component in children of type text. Oh, that's not going to work because we need to include using Unity engine dot UI, because now we can make reference to that text class, whereas we couldn't a moment ago. Text dot text is going to be equal to our inventory dot stack size dot to string. So let's give this a go. Any actual? Yes, there is. Oh, we can't pass it a game object. We pass it a transform, not a game object. There we go. Happy about that. Hit play. Load. Hey, look at that. 10, 18, and 45. Our stack sizes are correctly being displayed, which is just great. And because it's a UI canvas, it is very fast. It's optimized for this sort of thing. It culls nicely. And it is bound to the world over here. So it's part of the object world as opposed to being indexed based on the screen interface. And it looks pretty good. And again, it's very tweakable. The UI system, the new Unity UI system actually has good font control. For the very first time in Unity, we have half decent like font stuff. So that's nice to see. Yeah, cool. I think that looks very legible. Zooming out this far, maybe a little less so. But you almost don't really expect anything to be legible at this distance. And, you know, once you get to, like, anywhere here, that's good. I mean, it's hard to feel like there's any way to, like, cram in a different font that would also look good. Actually, I really like this font for the numbers. Which one is this one? Kubelin Bold. And actually, there's a non-bold. There's an italic SC, is that the normal one? This, I think, is the non-bold version. Which won't get updated because it's the prefab. Okay, so I've updated the prefab here. Let me load this again. This is the non-bold version. Yeah, quite a bit thinner, which takes up less space. It's slightly less readable in a sense, like at certain resolutions, but it is a little bit cleaner. The other thing that may help is changing the colors here. Like if we used white text and a black border or different things like that, there may be different amounts of legibility. I'm not going to stress about it too much because that's something that we're going to be working on more in the future, and people with better eyes will give some feedback. And I don't know, we can tweak this sort of infinitely for extra clarity. I guess I'll leave this as is with the non-bold version. That's going to be fine. All right, let's fix these stupid sprites. I've gone and shot myself in the foot for way too long, making too much work. So I think that'll be mostly, well, I was going to say at the end of the program. Not quite, because we are then going to have to update the rotation code to be non-stupid. Right now, our object rotation code has to be stupid because our sprites are not centered. And this is also going to save us a little bit of work every time. So we're just going to change everything to the default, which is the center pivot. That's the word I was looking for before. So all these graphics, I'm going to reset you to the default. Look at all this work I put in, and now I'm undoing it. It will make life more simple for going on. There's like the one place that it causes some issues with is when you're trying to do, if you're trying to convert world coordinates to a tile. So for some of our mouse over code, for example, because I don't think we're doing a raycast. We might be, I don't remember. But if we're doing a mouse over code where we're just transforming the world position of the mouse into a tile, then we'll have to offset the world position of the mouse by half a unit. But that's literally the only place we'll have to do it. Now it's turning out we're doing way more work everywhere else to get this done. So I think I've gone and set that all to centered. Excellent. I mean, it's not going to take us that long to change. These steel plates, like that. It's just going to be a little bit longer. What was this? Oh, that's my background, which at some point you'll have to, oh, we're not even using the background anymore. And center and the circle cursor as well. So center is the default for sprites. So now if we hit play, first everything should still look okay because relative to each other. Right. How come? So it's which one is off? Is it the background? Something's clearly off by half a unit, which is fine. And then if I say here, where does it change? Okay, so it's our background is off relative to our mouse, although I think that actually means our furniture is off by half a unit more than anything else. Yeah, because I mean, this is fine. The walls are, I didn't update the walls, that's why. I forgot that I missed the walls in here. And I'm gonna have to go in and make the change. That explains it. I was like, hold on, something is not adding up. The fact that the mouse was correctly, what I was doing is I was mousing over the barrier between two rooms and just checking the tooltip to see when it told me the rooms change. And I know that the mouse is going to be off by half a unit. And so the fact that the room changes seem to be synchronized with the walls is a pretty big clue that my walls were not updated. Because the walls should look in sync, and it should be the tooltip, or in other words, the mouse that's off by 1 or half a unit. And so there's just that one function. We have one function somewhere that takes our current mouse position and converts it to world units, and we'll just have to shift it over by half. And that's that. Okay, so you guys are all centered. So now apply. Now the world should look well, but the mouse should misbehave. Load. Whoops, I missed one. Which one was it? Oops, these are missed. It'd be nice to do this in bulk, but as far as I can tell, you can't. Maybe you can. Are those the only ones I missed? You. There's no bits on the outside because that's handled everywhere else. So apply. Did I just hit revert? I hope not. Nope. Hit play. Load. Okay. The door. Oh, yeah. The door. This door here is off because in my object rotation code, I had to put in the ugly hack to move things over, which I was never keen on. And now we don't need to put in that ugly hack, and now our rotated doors will look fine. Our text is off right now because we introduced this code to be half a unit off. So let's go and change that to to just say, yeah, just make sure you're centered on your parent, or you have the same position as your parent. Now all of a sudden you will look a lot better without having to have any little fudge code in there. Nice, that looks great. If we look at your mouse, look at the tooltip over here with the room index. Notice where it changes from 0 to 1. I mean, it actually looks good on the door because the door is in the middle, but if we look at the walls, where it changes from -1, that's where the mouse thinks, just as I move from here, I'm going to move up a little bit to here, that's where the mouse thinks the wall starts. And then if we go here, you'll see where it thinks the wall ends. So the mouse is off by half a coordinate, and that's because we are, the mouse just says, well, in world units, you're moving from world unit, 15 to world unit 16 right here. That's where the boundary is. But our sprites are centered on world units, so the 15 to 16 split is actually aligned with the middle of the graphic, and that's just the reason we want to put it in there. Luckily, we have a single world controller with a single function that checks coordinates. So get tile at world coordinate here, that's it. So our mouse, at this point, has been converted from the mouse's screen coordinates into world coordinates, but our tiles are offset just by half a unit. And I think what we actually have to do is go minus by half a unit and minus by half a unit. I think in both directions is correct. Let's give that a go. Just to accommodate the offset tiles. So now, really? In my tooltip code, do I have get mouse over tile? This is returning the wrong tile. Why do I have code written twice? I do have code written twice. That's not right. Hang on. What code did I just change? I mean, so this is fine. This is not a thing. I'm really confused. When I check the mouse controller and open this, where the hell did I just write my code? Oh, it's here. Get tile at world coordinate. Oh, which is part of my world controller. Apparently, I didn't realize it clicked on the wrong thing in the first place. But this is the thing that we want to use. So this function here, get mouse over tile, should be asking for, instead of get tile at and feeding something in, it should be asking for the, what's it called? Get tile at world coordinate. From the world controller. Dot get tile at world coordinate, instead of asking instance, instead of trying to ask the game world directly, it should be asking the world controller, hey, here is a world position, tell me the tile there. So really the only function in the game that should be converting Unity world coordinates to a tile is this one over here. So actually it's nice that we caught that. So let's see this again. Load. Now we're getting errors all of a sudden. What's the difference between this and what we had before? I should have copied when I just wrote. Oh, come on, be faster. These two are doing exactly the same thing, except without the half a unit offset, right? Because I'm passing it an X and a Y, and it's flooring it, right? The X component is the floor, get tile at. We're just calling get tile at in both cases. Return world controller dot instance dot the get tile at world coordinate instead of just the other get tile at, and we're passing current frame position. And internally, it's just taking the X and flooring it. Taking the X, flooring it, and then just returning this. How does this result in different behavior? Oh, okay. It's just giving me an error because it wasn't over anything before. Now it is working. But we actually need to, I think, not subtract. I think we're adding. So I just got the math wrong. Yeah, I guess that error was nothing. It was just that we were mousing over nothing. So it's sort of kind of a legitimate error, although we probably have to do some checking. Has this always been the case? Because yeah, we didn't actually change our function. Load. Oh, I know why it was giving that. Because on initial load, it's probably, because it always tries to get the mouse over coordinates for the tooltip. And because we had the minus in there instead of the plus, so I think by default, like, first thing it does is it asks for, like, a tile from world coordinate 0, 0, because nothing's been set yet. And so because we had the minus, it was asking for something that was, well, off the map and giving us an error. Now it's always starting, the tooltip always starts by showing us this, but we should be able to reproduce that error by, yeah, going outside the bounds. So, okay, that's interesting, and it just revealed something. But let's see here. Now it correctly changes, this is room 0, which is outside, because it's exposed. And as soon as we go over the wall graphic, it says -1. And as soon as we leave the mouse graphic, it's back to 2 over here. That's great. And then horizontally, goes to -1 and goes to 0. There we go. So now we have a much, much simpler life. And we can get rid of a lot of stupid stuff, like in our furniture sprite controller, where we change the rotation. And we have that ugly hack to compensate for the bottom left anchor. We can just get rid of that line completely. So now our vertical door will look sane. And it does. Everything looks fine, because now it can just pivot around the center point. So I should have never done that. But, I know, learning experience. There's some games, life is easier if you set the index to the bottom left corner, but I think, especially given the fact that we keep having to set that for every sprite, is a good sign. We'll just accept always in the future that the center, the pivot will be in the center, and then we'll compensate for things other than that. Because you still have to compensate in the mouse over here. But all right, so that's looking good now. Let's make sure that our building code is still fine. So if I click right over here. Ah! Aha! So in our click drag code, there's still something that is not using our one and only function to determine where clicks are starting and ending. I don't think that's the build mode controller. I think that's still in the mouse controller. Yeah, because we don't look at like drag, start, or end or anything like that at all. Build mode just keeps track of what mode we're in and then gets told to build on this tile. And it's the mouse controller that calls build mode multiple times for update dragging here. Yeah, see? I guess it's because we're tracking here is the raw position, and we're not converting it to a sprite until right at the end. Oh, no, right over here, right? All these floors over here, and then we're doing things, and then we're saying get tile at blah. So instead of doing the conversion to a floor here, we could just wait and then call our master function. I'm not sure that that will work with these things, so I think it's probably fine if we just add the half unit here. I don't like, you know, sort of having this code be in two places, but I think it's fine, and the drag code is certainly a little bit different. So now let's see, build wall, click here, that looks good, and now drag from here to here, that all looks excellent. So I think we have gone and sorted all that code out perfectly fine. And we can also confirm that we are happy with our doors by doing something like that and then going door there and there. Aha! Our job sprite controller system doubled up on that, on some of this code too. Oh, just doubled up on the rotation. Yeah, which makes sense. Job sprite controller, open U. So again, you had the ugly hack. Because we don't share the code between the job sprite controller and the furniture thing, even though there's a lot of duplication between them, and we may want to find a way to combine them or subclass them in the future. But for now, we're okay. So again, let's go with wall, 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 door, door. Oops, that's an extra click. That is legitimately how that door was supposed to go. We can, again, we can check that I didn't that I'm not lying to you. If I go door there we go. That's good. Because, yeah, we can still draw multiple doors right now, even though it makes no sense. So it looks like we have updated that. We've got a cool little text. We didn't get to updating our character's job behavior and inventory, like carrying, so that he has to pick up stuff to go and build stuff. That will come next time. And honestly, that's going to take at least one video. It might be another mega-sized video. That may be the sort of thing we have to split into two, because there's quite a bit of stuff to update, you know? What does it mean to require a character to pick up some stuff before going to build to the wall? Because right now, you grab a job, the job tells you where the job is. It's the tile, right? The job description includes a tile description and the thing to do when you're there. Like, it's got a job complete callback. So that job complete callback gets called after the character gets to the location tile and spends the required amount of time, which I think we have it at +1 or 0.1 seconds right now, right? So all it does is it walks to this tile, spends 0.1 seconds waiting, and then calls a callback to complete the job, which is where the wall gets built. Great. But now, completing a job is not as simple as walking somewhere and firing off a function. Now there's multiple steps. Yeah, the job is here, but before we go here, and before we can start working on it, it requires that there's a certain amount of inventory in this tile. You know, maybe you need 5 metal plates to build a wall. Great, so you can't start working on this job until there's 5 metal plates sitting in this tile that is there to serve the job. And so first thing you have to do is find the closest metal plate to you. Then go and grab 5 of them. What does it mean for your character to be carrying 5 plates? Then you walk over there. Then you sort of like drop the plates on the ground and tell the job, these plates are for you. And also, when we go and pick up plates, we can't pick up plates that are reserved for a job, right? We drop the plates in the tile, tell the job this is for you, and we tell the world, hey, these metal plates are for this job. Don't pick them up as normal inventory items. And then once you hit like the 5 metal plates that are required, then you can spend the time doing the job, complete the piece of furniture, and make sure to destroy the stack of inventory because it got used up. So there's a lot of little sub-steps to doing that. Although I do feel like there's a good chance we can cover that in one video. I don't think we're going to run into too many gotchas. All the steps are pretty logical, just a question of making sure that we're organized and working it in a proper way. And then after that, you know, maybe the next video, I don't know, we'll add a button to destroy stuff, right? We do have this bulldoze button, but right now all it does is it removes floor tiles, which is just like, you know, and building floor tiles is also instant. Obviously, we'll want to add this sort of floor system to the job system, but I also want to be able to destroy an existing piece of furniture like a wall, which is going to require us to revamp our flood fill algorithm ever so slightly, because right now the flood fill just triggers when you build a wall, and it behaves in a certain way, but then we'll have to also have it trigger when we destroy a wall, and it's going to behave in a slightly different way, which we've talked about. And when you destroy a wall, I want to have that wall spawn, you know, some metal bits. If it takes 5 metal plates to build a wall, maybe when you destroy a wall, you get 3 back or something like that, right? Some of it gets destroyed, but you're able to salvage some. So that'll be really interesting to look at in the future. Anyway, hope you found this useful. I hope everyone is happy that we've gone ahead and finally centered those sprites, which is a heck of a lot better. And it's just going to keep making life a lot easier for us going forward. The downloads have been updated up to part 37, and I'm going to try real hard to upload part 38 right now for people. And yeah, I can certainly see the argument. Some people like that we call this inventory, some people don't. I think items is always just too generic, and that was the original problem, but I don't know. We'll leave inventory for now. We can always change it later. Thanks for watching, folks. See you next time. Thank you to everyone who pledged to support this in February and is making these videos happen through March and early April. And of course, these mic check supporters. We've got Wes Eldenboving again, Craig Mortel, Nail Vikstrom, Neil Blakely Milner, Speedy Savant, Valiant Cake Fiend, Aaron Toyson, Marius Field Vold, Ole Peter, Talgo, probably Ole, Julian Ogier, Lafone, Steven Stager, Michael McClintock, Kale the Quick, Drazion, Bite Rash, Adjective, and Andrew Henninger. And everyone who just watches and shares and favorites and comments and subscribes, thank you so much for just continuing to make these videos a thing that we can do. I think it's pretty awesome, and I hope you do too. See you next time, folks.